I would also like to thank many of my colleagues for the opportunity to not only speak today, but for the many members from both sides of the aisle who have reached out to me in support following an incident earlier this week. About 2 days ago, I was walking up the steps of the Capitol when Representative Yoho suddenly turned a corner, and he was accompanied by Representative Roger Williams, and accosted me on the steps right here in front of our nation's Capitol. I was minding my own business, walking up the steps, and Representative Yoho put his finger in my face. He called me disgusting. He called me crazy. He called me out of my mind. And he called me dangerous. And then he took a few more steps, and after I had recognized his comments as rude, he walked away and said, "I'm rude. You're calling me rude." I took a few steps ahead, and I walked inside and cast my vote. I walked back out, and there were reporters in the front of the Capitol, and in front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, "a fucking bitch." These are the words that Representative Yoho levied against a congresswoman, the congresswoman that not only represents New York's 14th congressional district, but every congresswoman and every woman in this country, because all of us have had to deal with this in some form, some way, some shape, at some point in our lives.
Okay, this is according to the Hill's reporting, our own reporter here, Mike Lillis, who's been on the show a number of times. He does a great job.
And he was there for all.
And he was there. He listened to it, right? Yeah. So this wasn't like a source told him. He actually heard it. This was done in front of the Hill's reporter. So Yoho comes up to AOC, who she says she's never spoken with before, says that she's disgusting for suggesting recently that poverty and unemployment are driving a spike in crime in New York City. He says, "You're out of your freaking mind." She shoots back that he's being rude, because he is being rude. And then as he walks away, he calls her an effing bitch, okay? These are members of Congress. He's saying this to his colleague in Congress, in earshot of a Capitol Hill, of a reporter here at the Hill.
That's how shameless he is.
It's disgusting. It's outrageous. It's insane.
Yeah, I don't know.
Representative Yoho's comments were not deeply hurtful or piercing to me, because I have worked a working class job. I have waited tables in restaurants. I have ridden the subway. I have walked the streets in New York City. And this kind of language is not new. I have encountered words uttered by Mr. Yoho and men uttering the same words as Mr. Yoho while I was being harassed in restaurants. I have tossed men out of bars that have used language like Mr. Yoho's. And I have encountered this type of harassment riding the subway in New York City. This is not new. And that is the problem. Mr. Yoho was not alone. He was walking shoulder to shoulder with Representative Roger Williams. And that's when we start to see that this issue is not about one incident. It is cultural. It is a culture of lack of impunity, of accepting of violence and violent language against women, and an entire structure of power that supports that. Because not only have I been spoken to disrespectfully, particularly by members of the Republican Party and elected officials in the Republican Party, not just here, but the President of the United States last year told me to go home to another country, with the implication that I don't even belong in America.
Mr. Trump, would you be willing to not use the phrase "go back to your country" to citizens and women of color who are either citizens or have been born in this country? Would you be willing to not use that?
I think it's terrible when people speak so badly about our country, when people speak so horribly. I have a list of things here. I'm not going to bore you with it because you would be bored. You wouldn't write it anyway. But I have a list of things here said by the congresswomen that is so bad, so horrible, that I almost don't want to read it. It's so bad. It's my opinion they hate our country. And that's not good. not acceptable. Thank you very much, everybody.
Mr. President, isn't it a core value to be able to criticize this country? Isn't that a
Thank
core
you very
American
much.
value?
Thank you, President.
The governor of Florida, Governor DeSantis, before I even was sworn in, called me a whatever that is. Dehumanizing language is not new. And what we are seeing is that incidents like these are happening in a pattern. This is a pattern of an attitude towards women and dehumanization of others. So while
this girl, Ocasio Cortez, or whatever she is, I mean, she's in a totally different universe. It's basically socialism wrapped in ignorance, and it's problematic.
So while I was not deeply hurt or offended by little comments that are made, when I was reflecting on this, I honestly thought that I was just going to pack it up and go home. It's just another day, right? But then yesterday, Representative Yoho decided to come to the floor of the House of Representatives and make excuses for his behavior. And that I could not let go. I could not allow my nieces, I could not allow the little girls that I go home to, I could not allow victims of verbal abuse and worse to see that excuse, and to see our Congress accept it as legitimate and accept it as an apology, and to accept silence as a form of acceptance. I could not allow that to stand, which is why I'm rising today to raise this point of personal privilege.
I rise to apologize for the abrupt manner of the conversation I had with my colleague from New York. It is true that we disagree on policies and visions for America, but that does not mean we should be disrespectful. Having been married for 45 years with 2 daughters, I'm very cognizant of my language. The offensive name-calling words attributed to me by the press were never spoken to my colleagues, and if they were construed that way, I apologize for their misunderstanding.
And I do not need Representative Yoho to apologize to me. Clearly, he does not want to. Clearly, when given the opportunity, he will not. And I will not stay up late at night waiting for an apology from a man who has no remorse over calling women and using abusive language towards women. But what I do have issue with is using women, our wives and daughters, as shields and excuses for poor behavior. Mr. Yoho mentioned that he has a wife and 2 daughters. I am 2 years younger than Mr. Yoho's youngest daughter. I am someone's daughter too. My father, thankfully, is not alive to see how Mr. Yoho treated his daughter. My mother got to see Mr. Yoho's disrespect on the floor of this house towards me on television. And I am here because I have to show my parents that I am their daughter and that they did not raise me to accept abuse from men. Now, what I am here to say is that this harm that Mr. Yoho tried to levy against me was not just an incident directed at me. But when you do that to any woman, what Mr. Yoho did was give permission to other men to do that to his daughters. In using that language in front of the press, he gave permission to use that language against his wife, his daughters, women in his community. And I am here to stand up to say that is not acceptable.
I'm passionate about those affected by poverty. My wife Carolyn and I started out together at the age of 19 with nothing. We did odd jobs, and we were on food stamps. I know the face of poverty, and for a time it was mine.
But Ted Yoho he's full of it. So he says, oh, I was on food stamps. Well, now he's in favor of cutting food stamps. See, that's pathological. I was helped by this program, which is incredibly vital, but I'm going to cut it because he's afraid it breeds a culture of dependency. But you're living proof that that's actually not the case. It's not like people who are on food stamps love the fact that they're on food stamps. No. Sometimes people go through temporary, bad times. And we need to help out the people who are most vulnerable among us. So he used food stamps, and then now he tries to cut food stamps. He tries to tie it with work requirements and whatnot. And the other thing is, he's also against raising the minimum wage. So he's against the food stamps. He wants to cut the food stamps, even though he was on them. And also, if you work full-time, Ted Yoho is cool with you not making enough money to survive. I hate these guys, man. I mean, it really is incredible how callous and cold and cruel their ideology is.
I cannot apologize for my passion or for loving my God, my family, and my country. I yield back.
Bro, nobody was asking for you to apologize for your God, your family, or your country. These people, they talk to themselves, man.
You know how I see this? This was gaslighting at its finest. The president has set this dangerous precedent that men can just say something, didn't even happen, when the press witnessed it. In my opinion, Congressman Yoho is actually just following Trump's lead, just saying it didn't happen, just saying no, he never called Congresswoman Alexandria Cortez an effing bitch, even though a press member and the congresswoman both heard it. Representative Yoho, the congresswoman certainly doesn't need me sticking up for her, but let's be clear, that was no apology. Ocasio Cortez made it clear that this moment was about so much more than just this one incident, that this repeated pattern of belittling women, these degrading attacks against women, has to come to an end.
I do not care what your views are. It does not matter how much I disagree or how much it incenses me or how much I feel that people are dehumanizing others. I will not do that myself. I will not allow people to change and create hatred in our hearts. And so what I believe is that having a daughter does not make a man decent. Having a wife does not make a decent man. Treating people with dignity and respect makes a decent man. And when a decent man messes up, as we all are bound to do, he tries his best and does apologize. Not to save face, not to win a vote. He apologizes genuinely to repair and acknowledge the harm done so that we can all move on. Lastly, what I want to express to Mr. Yoho is gratitude. I want to thank him for showing the world that you can be a powerful man and accost women. You can have daughters and accost women without remorse. You can be married and accost women. You can take photos and project an image to the world of being a family man and accost women without remorse and with a sense of impunity. It happens every day in this country. It happened here on the steps of our nation's capital. It happens when individuals who hold the highest office in this land admit to hurting women and using this language against all of us. But once again, I thank my colleagues for joining us today. I will reserve the hour of my time, and I will yield to my colleague, Representative Jayapal of Washington. Thank you.